Welcome to literary and jury charge practice. Let's start out with this short narrative answer. Get our fingers warmed up. Ready? Here we go. He made an adjustment to a bolt on the top of the exhaust system. There is a bolt on there that has an Allen type head on it. He loosened that bolt and he moved the adjustment on the exhaust system coming out from the boat on the steering drive. Then he tightened it back up. And as near as I can explain it, this nut sat right above the propeller. This is the exhaust system from the motor itself on the line coming out. You can adjust it in different directions for any way you want it. He told me emphatically it was correct after he fixed it. He said that the setting had been reversed when I was using the boat the first 2 times I had taken it out. When we took the boat out again, we had trouble with it right away. It kept misfiring and it stalled twice before it quit entirely. I was really unhappy about it. All right, now let's see about a little jury charge warm-up. This is a criminal jury charge. Ready? Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it now becomes your duty to render a verdict upon the question of the guilt or innocence of the defendant and upon the degree of his guilt if guilty. In doing this, you must be guided by the principles of law bearing upon the case that I will now proceed to lay before you. In determination of all questions of fact, the sole responsibility is with the jury. You are the sole judges of the evidence, of the weight of the evidence, and of the credibility of the witnesses. Any comments that I may make upon the evidence will be made not for the purpose of controlling you in your view of the facts, but only to aid you in applying the principles of law to the facts as you may find them. You must not consider what I shall say concerning the evidence as being accurate, but you must depend upon your own recollection. You must not only consider the evidence to which I shall refer, but you must consider all of the evidence in the case. It is a fundamental principle of law that the defendants are presumed to be innocent until the contrary is proved. If there is a reasonable doubt as to a defendant's guilt, he must be acquitted. This presumption of innocence belongs to and remains with the defendant throughout the trial. The burden of proving the guilt of the defendant rests upon the prosecution at all times. A defendant is not obliged under the law to prove his innocence. The burden of proving a crime is always on the prosecution. It never shifts at any time to the defendant. The law also says the defendant must be proved guilty beyond a reasonable doubt before he may be convicted. What is a reasonable doubt? A reasonable doubt is a doubt for which you can give a reason based on the evidence in the case. All right, now hopefully we are warmed up. And let's try a little literary practice. And this is called, we had started this previously, this literary is called Captioning Conventions, a First Experience. Ready? Here we go. Okay, be honest. Did you sleep much the night before your captioning debut? I had to do some channel surfing while lying in bed, thinking I could still catch an early morning flight back home and no one would be the wiser, until the AB switch had nowhere to point but toward you, Deanna. But I also have to admit that the wine at dinner helped set the mood for the night's sleep. Once you got a look at the convention center setup, huge screens on the stage with captions and 4 hanging huge screens with caption, what were your thoughts? My first thought was that 7,500 people are going to have some good laughs at my expense. At the Monday morning kickoff, did you have any butterflies, even knowing Hillary Clinton was one of the keynote speakers? Having worked with Hillary Clinton several times over the years, she's not the one who put the fear of God in me. The whole idea of more than 7,500 convention delegates watching me was more intimidating than Senator Clinton. I'm my own worst critic, and that's where most of the butterflies came from. I did have the fear of having to caption a 400-word-per-minute speaker who was a mushmouth. I've had several speakers over the years at conventions who not only mumbled but also mumbled at 300 words per minute. When I get in those situations, I tend to start laughing uncontrollably, which means the quality of the writing goes down the tubes even more. After the first day was under your belt, did you have any concerns about returning the next day? I still had the fleeting thought of catching an early morning flight, but I just figured if this experience doesn't kill me, I'll be a better, stronger reporter for having risen to the challenge. What differences did you notice in your writing style that caught your attention when captioning instead of convention reporting? When proper names would come up, I had to remember not to just write them phonetically because some ridiculous word combinations would have come up and did. The names were definitely a challenge, and trying to come up with a quick finger spelling to come close to what it sounded like. In convention reporting, when the delegates get up, you have the luxury of then searching for the correct spelling to enter into the transcript. Did you notice differences after a few hours of captioning of the thinking process that goes on versus convention reporting? Oh yes, convention reporting is 99% verbatim reporting, but it is stylized toward creating a readable bound book with pictures inserted. I definitely had to think more about how something would come out on the screen before writing it, or think if a term was in my dictionary or not, and whether to risk writing it or finger spelling the term. My brain hurt by the end of the first day. Now for some jury charge practice. Ready? Here we go. He has certain rights. At certain times he has the right of way. He has a right to rely upon certain things, but none of these rights may ever be used or exercised arbitrarily or carelessly, because to do so would be negligent in character. Similarly, pedestrians, those who use the streets, have certain duties of care which are fairly well established. One who has the green light in his favor may be said to have a light to proceed in reliance upon that green light in the absence of a clear warning of danger. You notice I did not say an absolute right to proceed. A pedestrian must have in mind the existence of such things as emergency vehicles. Likewise, the driver of an automobile must be mindful of the fact that one may start to cross the street with the light in his favor and yet have it change while he is on the way across. You notice that I have not talked in absolutes at all, but all other things being equal, one with a green light has the right to proceed in reliance upon that green light. A pedestrian must use ordinary care. He need not anticipate that anyone is going to violate the law or do wrong or be negligent. But when a warning is given to him, he must not do anything which would be negligent. A driver has the duty not to be wanton. He has the duty of observing at all times, bearing in mind that he is driving a motor vehicle, which is much more difficult to control than the legs of a pedestrian, and which moves even at a slow rate of speed much faster than any pedestrian. He has the duty to avoid people that might be on the streets. He has a positive duty to give warning to those people in the street by means of whatever devices are placed there for that purpose, a horn or a siren or a bell. And he has a positive duty where he observes one caught in the middle of the street between the lights, that is, when a light has changed while one is crossing the street, to permit that person to reach a place of safety. The right-of-way, as I have indicated to you, is usually with the person who has the green light in his favor, subject to all the conditions that I have told you are thrown about that. In short, neither the pedestrian nor the driver is at liberty to close his eyes and forge ahead without regard to the consequences. Each is bound to use the degree of care toward others and toward himself that is required of a reasonable person by all of these surrounding circumstances. Considering all the surrounding circumstances and then applying the rules as I have given them to you, you are to decide, has the plaintiff established by a preponderance of the credible evidence that the defendant was negligent in the particulars that I have explained to you? If that burden is not met by the plaintiff, you then and there decide in favor of the defendant. Assuming that the burden has been met, you go on to the next step and you ask yourselves, has the plaintiff established that she was free from contributory negligence? If you do not so find, then should stop then and there and find in favor of the defendant. All right, let's try some new literary material. And this is an article called Hello Darkness. A total eclipse of the sun comes to the U.S. in August. Ready? Here we go. A crowd of a few thousand congregated for the event of a lifetime, a celestial pas de deux. From our vantage point, a hilltop park in the town of Silvis, Turkey, skies were clear. Then the midday light began to fade. It was August 11, 1999, about an hour before a total solar eclipse. People circulated cardboard glasses so that we could watch the moon slink in front of the sun. Meanwhile, the shadow created by this celestial encounter, the umbra, was racing across Europe toward us at a speed of 1,600 miles per hour. The total eclipse would transpire when the umbra engulfed Silvis. A minute before totality, the horizon to the west darkened abruptly, and the crowd of amateur astronomers began to roar as the shadow approached. Then the moon slipped in front of the sun, and the city erupted in cheers as a ghostly white halo emerged from the moon's perimeter. It was now safe to remove our cardboard spectacles and uphold the vista. The sky was a deep dark blue, and stars and planets came out for a bow. The horizon was aglow in every direction. The air had chilled, and with the color drained from flowers and faces, the lighting was mystical. A total solar eclipse transpires somewhere on the planet about 7 times each decade. On August 21, 2017, it's America's turn as a solar eclipse traces a path across 12 states from Oregon to South Carolina. It will be the first time since 1979 that the moon's shadow will touch the lower 48, according to predictions by Fred Espenak, scientist emeritus at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland, and the last to be visible from here for 7 years. While many of us have seen a partial eclipse, witnessing a total solar eclipse is rare and usually requires some effort. Southern Californians will be able to see a partial eclipse in August, but a position inside the narrow path of totality will yield a dramatically different experience than you can safely view with the naked eye, and for that you'll need to travel. It is one of the most startling and exquisitely beautiful sights in all of nature, suggests Espenek. It is only during a total eclipse that the sun's entire brilliantly bright disk is hidden from the view, revealing the faint and glorious corona that surrounds the sun. We will get back to the rest of that article. Let's see, we did have some maybe challenging words in there. A celestial pas de deux. Celestial, pas is P-A-S, new word D-E, new word D-E-U-X, pas de deux. Silvus turkey. Umbra, U-M-B-R-A. Solar eclipse. Scientist emeritus. All right, well, just possibly some words to add to your challenging word list. All right, we'll get back to that. Now let's try some more jury charge. The subject of this jury charge is power of the Court of Appeals. Ready? Here we go. These two consolidated cases present a question of the power of the Court of Appeals to issue writs of mandamus to compel a district judge to vacate his orders entered under Rule 53 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure referring antitrust cases for trial before a master. The petitioner, a United States District Judge sitting in the Northern District of Illinois, contends that the Court of Appeals have no such power, and even if they did, that these cases are not appropriate ones for its exercise. The Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit has decided unanimously that it has such power, and by a divided court that the circumstances surrounding the references by the petitioner required it to issue the mandamus about which he complains. The importance of the question in the administration of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, together with the uncertainty existing on the issue among the Court of Appeals, led to our grant of a writ of certiorari. We conclude that the Court of Appeals properly issued the writs of mandamus. These petitions for mandamus filed in the Court of Appeals arose from two antitrust actions instituted in the District Court in 1955. One involves 87 plaintiffs, all operators of retail independent shoe repair shops. The claim of these plaintiffs against the 6 named defendants, who are manufacturers, wholesalers, and chain store operators, is identical. The claim asserted in the complaint is a conspiracy between the defendants to fix the price of shoe repair supplies sold in interstate commerce in the Chicago area in violation of the Sherman Act. The allegations also include a price discrimination charge under the Robinson-Patman Act. Another case involves 6 plaintiffs, all wholesalers of shoe repair supplies, and 6 defendants, including manufacturers and wholesalers of such supplies. The allegations here also include charges of monopoly and price fixing under the Sherman Act and price discrimination in violation of the Robinson-Patman Act. Both complaints pray for injunctive relief treble damages, and an accounting with respect to the discriminatory price differentials charged. The references to the master were made under the authority of Rule 53 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. The cases were called on February 23, 1957 on a motion to reset them for trial. All parties were anxious for an early trial, but plaintiffs wished an adjournment until May. The plaintiffs estimated that the trial would take 6 weeks, whereupon petitioner stated he did not know when he could try the case, if it might take as long as 6 weeks. He asked if the parties could agree to have a master hear it. The parties ignored this query, and at a conference in chambers the next day, petitioner entered the orders of reference sua sponte. The orders declared that the court was confronted with an extremely congested calendar and that exceptional conditions exist for this reason, requiring the references. The cases were referred to the master to take evidence and to report the same to this court, together with his findings of facts and conclusions of law. It was further ordered in each case that the master commence the trial of this cause on a certain date and continue with diligence, and that the parties supply security for costs. While the parties had deposited some $8,000 costs, the record disclosed that all parties objected to the references and filed motions to vacate them. Upon petitioner's refusal to vacate the references, these mandamus actions were filed in the Court of Appeals, seeking the issuance of writs ordering petitioner to do so. And that will conclude our literary and jury charge practice.